Welcome to another special edition of Choke Boy Chasers. As always, I'm joined by the Choke Bros, Eric and Dash. I am one of your hosts, G, and we are joined by a man who needs little introduction. Star of the critically and commercially acclaimed Resident Evil series, Jeff Schine. Jeff portrays action heroes Chris Redfield and Carlos Oliveira. He also happens to play this little character named Steve Rogers, or Captain America, as you may know him by in Marvel's The Avengers, and obviously so many more. Jeff, it is so awesome to have you on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I think without further ado, let's just go ahead and let's kick this off. Eric, why don't you go ahead and get us started, man?
Yep, for sure. Jeff, thank you again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
my pleasure.
one of our favorite things to do is hear how people kind of got into acting, voice acting, stuff like that. So we'd like to hear yours.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess I had been doing little bits of like plays and kind of school stuff when I was younger, like third, fourth, and fifth grade, but it was never really serious. Funny enough, like in my school, which I think is maybe different than like other schools, it was kind of cool to do like some of those school plays. So like all me and my buddies and like all the dudes that like played sports like did the plays. But it was never, but that at that time didn't really mean anything. And then like middle school, high school, I never really did anything. I had just up until that point just been a movie fanatic. I just loved film. I loved doing impressions, and I didn't have the context at that time even to consider that I was doing impressions or that there was. It was just something I was passionate about. I started a movie list when I was in like sixth grade of every movie I'd ever seen, and I just kept it going and going. And then at some point in college, I stopped and lost it, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films, and I just love movies. So at about senior year in high school is when I started taking it seriously. I did some local theater, and then funny enough, and I've told my buddy this before. My dad had a best friend for about 50 years, and so we like knew the family fairly well. And his son, who was a slightly bit older than I am, had just been in LA and just finished doing a project with Robert De Niro. And we were out in Maine at an island at the house that they had, and we were just visiting, and he was like talking to me about it. I was just like, and I was just enamored with it and the process, and it just kind of clicked all of a sudden to me because there was something tangible in front of me that I could understand. That this was like something you could do for a living. So it literally, I mean, I'll tell you, like, and I've never told anyone this. I was like taking a walk around the little island, and I'm like a bit of I'm like a bit of a romantic, and I don't necessarily mean that like in romance, but like I view things romantically. So I was like walking and thinking and like really having this like moment by myself, and I saw this little penny on the floor, and I picked up this coin, and I thought it was a sign, and I bought this book by David Mamet, and I taped the penny to the inside, and so literally from that day I made the decision, and then I went to college, decided to major in acting, and I double majored in theater and English and minored in film. So did that at Hofstra in Long Island, and then graduated, did a year at home bartending, and then packed some bags and went out to LA. And that was a start.
Oh yeah, man. Shout out to Hofstra, one of our favorite Saints players went to Hofstra. Marcus Colston.
Yeah. We actually all met through a New Orleans Saints fan group, and
Oh, really?
Yeah, and one of their best players all time, Marcus Colston, actually went to Hofstra.
No way.
Yeah.
Like I think we have a couple, like people that are our claim to fame, but then like when I was there, the only thing that was really like hot shit at the time was our lacrosse team. Hofstra lacrosse was very good. I did a tiny bit of rugby, and then I rode crew. But at the time, yeah, lacrosse was where it was at.
Oh yeah.
Dash, why don't you go ahead and follow that up, man?
As we've gotten from other Resident Evil voice actors, the projects were always like under a code name. So there were a significant amount of time where sometimes they didn't even know who or what they were playing in. So when did that moment finally hit when you realized you were playing like Chris or Carlos?
Yeah, so with almost all the projects that I work on, and now it used to be some of just like the major stuff, but now it's really everything is codenamed. And you do get to a certain point where, I mean, I'm a gamer, so I can usually like there'll be things left in the script that I can kind of pick out and go, I recognize that they refer to a place because they'll change the title and the character names, but they kind of forget to like pull proper nouns out of the script.
Mhm.
But then you also get to a point where you kind of stop trying to figure it out unless you think it's really germane to the understanding of the universe. With Resident Evil, I don't think I mean, genuinely, I don't think I knew till like I booked the job and we might have even had a rehearsal and I met the director. I really didn't have any context whatsoever. And then so Steve was directing that, and then when Steve contacted me to come back and read again for Village, I had no idea what that role was going to be. And it didn't dawn on me till like after we'd gone deep into the casting process and Steve had expressed like some interest and we were kind of starting to chat about the role. And I think I can't even remember exactly, but I might have even said to him like, dude, is this Redfield? And he was like, yeah. And that was an interesting moment because obviously, like, being in the same universe twice in a way is can be a bit of a daunting task. But yeah, man, we never know. We never really know till we're there. They keep it pretty under wraps.
So, did you have any familiarity with Carlos or Chris as characters before getting the roles, or maybe you probably might have known about Chris after getting Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, like I didn't really know about Carlos at all. And then Chris I was familiar with, but only like, as a distant reference. I believe Chris first appears in Resident Evil 2.
Resident Evil 1.
One. He's one of the original
He's
OG.
Is he in 2?
It's
mentioned.
His sister is in 2.
His sister's in 2. I think it's 1,
5,
5, 6.
Veronica.
Yeah.
So
there's so many games.
Yeah. So the only time like Resident Evil was always on my radar, but mostly because my cousin was a big fan of the games, and when we would go visit him in North Carolina, he would be playing them, and I would like play a little bit. At the time, they were so cool, and like as far as where games were at that moment, they were also kind of, I felt like, on the front edge of like horror and suspense, and the games really had an impact. Then obviously the film franchise kind of overshadowed, at least in my world, the games for a little bit. But so yeah, so I mean, like I knew about Chris and his legacy, but in many ways that like you could be aware of a comic book character but not know their origin story.
Yeah.
Or a lot of like, so there wasn't a lot that I had to either forget or pull reference from when that role came up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's actually a perfect segue. Eric, I know that you were talking about actually 2 of those characters as well.
Yep. And my main question was, did you actually go back once you figured out who you were playing? Did you go back and listen to any of the old clips and like watch anything on the old voice acting, kind of like listen to the way they portrayed it, or did you just kind of just do it yourself and then not listen to it at all?
Yeah, I really didn't. And not because like the list of actors who have played, at least Chris prior to me, like Carlos, as far as I knew, and I really didn't look into it very much, but as far as I was aware, Carlos hadn't really been tackled in like a new modern gaming environment. Like I think maybe he had like a couple lines in one game at one point, and
he was only in 3.
Yeah,
and it was very well, it just wasn't where games are now. So it's a very different experience, a very different kind of thing. So for Carlos, nothing at all. But Carlos also really jumped off the page for me. Like I kind of got who this guy was right away. At least as far as I knew how I wanted to approach him. For Chris, there's a long list of actors who have played Chris, all of whom are like some I have met and know, and then others I just know by name and career and legacy, and so there's been some like really talented dudes that have voiced Chris. That kind of thing is always a fine line because I feel a responsibility to pay homage to the universe that Chris is in. Like you have to honor where he's been and you have to honor where the story is now. And then you have to kind of inject how you want to approach it. And you can't, you can't disrespect the canon by deciding that you're going to rip Chris out from the roots and just like do whatever the fuck you want. But I knew it wasn't going to be helpful for me personally to go back and sort of even have any of their voices in my head at all. I just didn't want that for this particular one. Not to say that there aren't other projects where like it has been helpful for me to like hear what other actors have done with the character, because sometimes there's like we all steal and mine and I say like borrow from each other. And I think it's a high compliment to inspire another actor. But so the short, not long-winded answer of that is no, I didn't go back and really try to pull anything. I just didn't think it was going to be helpful.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And so obviously playing a version, we kind of just dove right into this. So playing a version of a character that's already done, it's a pretty unique opportunity, but it does present its challenges because just like you said, you're trying to pay homage to those previous people who've portrayed the character while also creating your own identity within the character. So we actually previously interviewed another Chris Redfield as well, Joe White, who actually played Chris in Resident Evil 1 HD. So
Nice.
yeah, so it, small world for sure.
Yeah.
But definitely obviously some major differences in the way that like he portrays it from the way you do. That also being said, Chris has gone through some shit in that period of time. So it's fair to say. But also just wanted to like, so how much of yourself, like how much do you like lean on your experiences when you're playing a character like Chris or Carlos?
I've always felt like as I approach a character, like they're all in some ways like there have to be echoes of you in everything. Now that may be like it may not be overarching, it may just be situational. I mean, like, look, if you look on paper, like what are the similarities between me and a zombie killing team leader who, you know what I mean, like boulder punching, like I just did nothing really, right? Except at the end of the day, like we're all human beings, and that means we all draw from the same emotional pool. And so all we are is, as far as my estimation is, are like varying volumes of those emotions. So you might be a little bit more dialed up in aggression, you might be a little more dialed down on sadness, or whatever the case may be. And then that's also situational. And I think when you live in a universe where, and truly I believe in this, like anything is possible as far as a scene can go a million different ways, and you are capable of acting in surprising ways if pushed far enough, hard enough, in the right way. So yeah, you bring yourself, you have to. Your life experience as an actor is where you draw from. And then you just have to have like a really good imagination and like be willing to accept the idea that if I had to, I could kill. If I needed to, I'm capable of anything. So, yeah, there's echoes of you in everything you do. I think if you don't, it's probably a soulless character.
Absolutely. Eric, why don't you go ahead and follow that up, man?
Yep. So you mentioned that you were a gamer kind of before we fired this up. Not all of our guests are. So man, we want to know what you game on.
Yeah. So I was growing up, I was Nintendo was like really the thing for me. And then Nintendo into I remember we used to go to our local video store, which was Go Video, and rent a Super Nintendo just so I could play Street Fighter 2. That felt like I was living in a whole other world when that was happening. So I came up on like early systems and a little bit of PC gaming when I was a kid, Warcraft and Starcraft and Descent. I don't know if you guys ever. I might be significantly older than you guys, but there was it's like a spaceship game called Descent, which is pretty cool. But now I'm like an Xbox guy. I have both systems. I have a PlayStation and an Xbox. I just find myself playing my Xbox more. And I don't have a ton of time right now, but when I do, I just jump on Call of Duty with my brother and a couple buddies, and we just kind of mess around a little bit. So I'm a little bit of a Warzone guy at the moment. I don't have much time for anything else. I think what I like about that is you could just like drop it and pick up and not have to.
Yeah.
Because I'm into a story, man. I gotta keep that.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Yeah, it's a turn your brain off and just kind of shut down for a bit kind of game. Like,
That's all I want to do. And it's funny
yeah,
because I'm explaining to my wife and she gets it. So it, really doesn't require an explanation. But I'm like, games like when you do them like that have really just become like the hangout. And truly, I say like, when people are in relationships, I'm like, be stoked if your guy or your girl choice of vice is to like play games with their friends a couple hours because there's a lot of other stuff they could be doing, a lot of other places they could be going, and trouble they could be getting into. But man, like, sitting in your basement with a pizza and your buddies, shooting the shit and hanging out. For me, like, it's more of a good hang than anything. Like, I mean, I'm
absolutely
competitive,
agree.
so that kind of takes over every once in a while. But at the end of the day, like, you just want to mess around and have a good time. So I think games are great for that.
Hell yeah. This is the clip we're gonna pull from the episode 100%. Dash, why don't you go next, man?
So I see that Nicole Tompkins, the voice actor for Jill Valentine, she put up a cover of "Have Yourself a Very Little Christmas" on her YouTube
Oh,
channel.
yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
featuring you. I've got to ask: is there any interest in pursuing a music career?
No,
Because
I mean, well, I'll tell you the truth, like the truth. First of all, like Nicole's one of my favorite people in the industry. I think she's a hell of a talented actress and a great person more than anything. It's funny, we're like we're slightly different generations, but she has like helped me with social media so much because I just can't stand it. Which sounds like such a important thing to say. I'm not accountable, but I just fucking hate it. I just can't do it. It's very challenging for me. I've always been very musical. I played piano growing up. I mess around with piano now. I played drums for a little while. I'm like desperate to get back into it in a serious way. I have done a musical in my younger days when I was like in sixth grade. And when I was young and like going through puberty, my voice, I used to lose my voice on a weekly basis. I mean, like lose my voice. Um, so that I had lost my voice during a couple of those performances. I don't fancy myself a singer. I don't think I'm tone deaf. I have very good rhythm, but I'm not much of a singer. So if I was gonna like, I do have a fantasy that at some point I get to play like drums or piano in like a band that's already established, like one of my buddies' bands, just like moonlight once in a while at a small little bar, every couple of weeks. Yeah, but that's about as far as musical as I think I could take it. The funny thing is, though, and I'll just say like apropos of nothing, but I find voiceover to be musical. And so I found those two like disciplines complement each other very well. When I'm listening to voice, whether it's commercial or narration or there's a rhythm and a flow to everything. And for me, like so I interpret it all as music.
and you never know, maybe you'll get that role that like Alan Wake 2, where you just get a whole musical sequence in the game.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
kind of a
yeah,
requirement there.
yeah, exactly.
But with you and Nicole, you also have the similarity of having two separate roles in the same franchise and both the same games. So, what
Right.
was it like to find out that you're working together with her again in Village after Resident Evil 3?
Well, I mean, that's just like a reunion tour, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's Nicole and Neil and I like kind of were the triumvirate from the remake, and then when we found that we were doing Village together, it's like those are like those are just like my people. They're just my friends, you know what I mean? So, and 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 really, when you're working on a project, like for me, it's always the people I remember. Like I remember a project being like cool or a project being fun or man, I really enjoyed playing this character. But the thing that like really sticks with you are like the people. And if you're lucky, you take like one or two from every project. Um, it's just such a huge community and like you wish you could take everybody with you, right? Um, but you get like one or two will stick around, and Neil and Nicole are like the two people for me. So I was like stoked to learn that we were, and Steve too. So it was like the same director, the same part of my cast, and we didn't really work together on Village because we weren't really on set very much together. Especially because that was like also COVID time. Plus, we didn't have scenes together.
Yeah.
Um,
How long
uh,
did it take to learn that you guys were all working on the same game? Because I'm sure NDAs, it's hard to figure that out at that point.
no, we knew sort of right away once we had been
Ah,
because we did have a table read together.
okay.
Mm.
And and when you find out what the project is and you get the cast list and stuff like and you're like working with pros. I mean, once the cast list is out, as long as no one from the cast leaks it, like you're pretty good to go.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so that was awesome. I mean, I was super stoked.
And that's you kind of answered this question just barely, but so you obviously playing Steve Rogers, Captain America, and the Avengers has one got to be such a cool experience because one, it's Steve Rogers, but also again you're working with some insanely talented folks in the industry. You've got Laura Bailey, Troy Baker, and some of the biggest voice actors in the world when it comes to gaming. Um, what was it like working on that project, and what was your favorite part of that one?
I mean, look, it was incredible when the opportunity came up. I've told this story a couple of times, but I'll tell you guys, like, I had auditioned a couple of times and didn't know what it was for. And then I was with my wife in the car, and I got a call from my agent or just a text, and the text just said, like, "You're available." And that's sort of like, sometimes your agent will call you and ask if you're available for something, right? Like, production's asking if you're available, meaning like, we're interested, we're trying to confirm dates, and we're basically just schedule checking. So this one wasn't a question. This was like, you're available. And like, I know her well enough to know like what that meant. I'm like, oh, something must be cool. But I don't know. I've been doing this long enough that I didn't like, it's not pessimistic. You just don't get your hopes up. You just, you go, great, awesome. Then yes, I'm available.
Right.
And she called me a couple minutes later. She's like, hey, you booked a job. You're going to be Captain America. And even then I was like, oh, cool. Because you don't know. I'm like, is it a mobile game? Is it a one-off? Is it like, it could be the varying sizes of whatever. And before I got the next email, I looked at my wife and I said, but it'd be super dope. Like, what if it's huge? Like, let's just say it's Marvel. It's a big gaming company. I said, and like, this would be the cast. And I named like 10 actors. And I also named everybody that ended up getting cast. So when when I got the cast list from my agent, I went, oh, this is not a small game. This is not going to be a small game. So at first it was like, there was definitely, I think at the beginning, some intimidation because, I hadn't done projects. I mean, look, I had done projects, but these were people who were already, juggernauts. So the intimidation was kind of like twofold, like in a couple ways. Like one, you get asked to play Captain America. That's not a small task. I don't care what project it is. At least it didn't feel small to me in the depth of which I cared about it. In a lot of ways, Cap's like the leader of the Avengers, right?
Right.
And then you find out you're going to be doing it with all these other people whom you respect, and you go like, well, I guess in some way, like, I have to also be like, I have to be the leader, not on set, but like, there's this weird, like, the pressures start to blur the lines of like, So there was a moment of like real intimidation. I was like, I remember having definitely a moment, and in all honesty, having a moment going like, can I fucking do this? Like, can I do this? Did they cast the wrong dude? And that went away quickly and was replaced by like, absolutely, this is where I'm supposed to be. I've been waiting for this. And I think just the best part of working on that project, again, like I say, is the people. I mean, it was really nice to get on set with these people whose work I know and find out like, oh, you're also cool. You're great people and you're real artists and you want to collaborate and oh, you're interested in talking about it. And oh, you want to like talk about a scene and run some lines and figure like no ego, no diva behavior. Like these are just good actors grinding it out like everybody else. And so I think set just became this like very comfortable, fun place. We worked together off and on for a couple of years. And Sean, our director, is like one of my favorite people to work with because he's just so fucking passionate and interested and again collaborative. And so it was just awesome. It was just a phenomenal experience. I couldn't say enough nice things about everybody I worked with. I would go back on that set in a heartbeat and be grateful to be there. So that was a great experience. Great experience.
Yeah. Dash coming in with our final question.
So you also have done some significant characters in anime, some of my favorite also, but how does it work in anime compared to video games in terms of like style and workflow?
Well, I mean, stylistically, very different, unless it's more like a more like serious anime series. But a lot of times, anime can be, I think like a bit bombastic. It lives more on the edges, always grounded in reality, but it does live on the edges, right? the workflow is very different. I mean, a game you're in production, you could be normally now you're in a production for like, 2+ years. So you're on set a couple weeks and then you're off for a couple months, and you're on set a couple weeks and you're off for a couple months. And, it's a very forgiving schedule as far as I'm concerned. If you're used to like working in, TV or film, that's like a very compact period of time. Games is like the same period of time, but stretched out over a couple of years. And then like sessions in the booth and pickups and stuff like that. Anime is just different for me because I do 90% of it from there.
Yeah.
And so like I get the call and we do it, and you grind out maybe 1, 2, 3 episodes as much as you can get through, and that's kind of like just depends on the actor's pace. I tend to work pretty quickly, so we move pretty fast. So it's just a very different like muscle, but I love it. Like the more wild and wacky and bananas things are, I love that shit.
Well, he did do Baki Hanma, so right there is like one of the craziest anime of all time.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, it's funny because I like all the anime I know is mostly the stuff that I've been in, because I just then I like kind of like look it up and research it. And that's another thing, anime I love. I just haven't deep dived into it as much as I would have liked to, or would like to. But it's so fun. It's so cool. And I've always been enamored with the art style of it. So, yeah, I love doing that stuff. Anime's great.
Oh, yeah. And I imagine some of the major differences when you're working on it, it's kind of like, when you're doing video games, sometimes you're doing the motion capturing and they're modeling the voices that you're doing.
Yes.
But with anime, you're dubbing. So you have to match your voice with the animation that's already been done.
That's the only challenging part for me in anime is I get very specific in how I want to deliver a line or believe it should be. And the hardest part sometimes is when you're restricted by not only the animation, which can sometimes you can play with a bit. I might feel like a line is a bit more subdued, but if my character is making like a giant surprise face, like, dude, you just can't do that. Like, you gotta match what's there. And then also sometimes they do have preferences for like enjoying the way the last performance was, and so there's kind of requests to keep it in a similar vein. Like, you can't go too far away from the original performance, and sometimes that can feel restricting, especially if some of the wilder characters I have like big ideas about. The wackier a character, the more I'm like, oh my god, let's push way the fuck out there. And you can kind of feel handcuffed a bit sometimes, but it's like anything, man. You just like you learn the parameters and the rules, and you figure out how to obey them, and then break them safely, and then you just play in the space you're given.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is.
I guess as
awesome.
another, just this is kind of separate random question. If
Anything
you've ever came across this being a Chris voice actor, have you ever encountered anybody asking you about like continuing the Redfield line jokes?
It's so funny. Somebody said that came up in a couple different that came up in a couple things, and I don't know exactly what it is. I just know a friend of mine said, who was it? Somebody said to me, basically the advice was just like, ignore that, dude. So I've never because I like to be able to plead ignorance if I can. So I've never looked it up. I've never I've had some signings where people have asked for something signed that way or asked a question. And I've always just like either glossed right over. So I don't know what it is. I just know I was told beware.
That's a perfect
You're about to
description.
lead me into dangerous territory now.
It's a running joke for the Res Evil fandom where basically it's just like Chris Redfield's hunting down Leon to have sex with Claire Redfield to continue the
So that
Redfield bloodline.
They'll have these super strong zombie fighting children, and it's
Chris is trying to recruit Leon to sleep with his sister.
Yes.
basically.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
So
There's so many pictures and like memes and just all these different scripts.
It
of, like,
is.
people.
That's weird.
It is weird as a word for it.
You know what the thing is? You know what the game of it is, though? It's like, it's weird, and like that kind of shit doesn't even shock me anymore. Like, man, you give the internet 5 minutes with anything and they'll figure out some way to perverse it.
Oh, 100%. And sometimes they do some amazing things with that.
I would say tons of times they do amazing things. Like, I mean, fans are so passionate and some of the most like creative. I've been sent some art and stuff, which I love getting art from fans. It's so fucking good. You know, you're like, so many times I'll get stuff and be like, why are you sending that to me? That should go to like a publishing house. So I love the fans are awesome. I mean, we'd be nowhere without them. So
I feel like that
Oh,
has
yeah.
to be a really special place once people start just giving you fan art.
yeah, it's awesome. It does. I don't know. For me, that stuff never gets old. I really enjoy. I mean, like genuinely and truly, and not just lip service. I really enjoy interacting and chatting with. I don't even like to say like fans, but just like it feels. That part feels collaborative to me too, because there's a part of me that's like we're sort of in this relationship together. You know, we're just on two different halves of it,
Right.
And I feel very privileged to, you know, I feel privileged that people allow me into their homes, give me their private time, and give time to the things that we do, and that feels like a real privilege to me, and I don't think it should be taken lightly, because like time is our most precious commodity, and if people are going to be consuming something you've done, I feel like you owe it to them and yourself to like, you know, respect it as well as them and their time. So that's why I'm looking forward this year. I'm being at some conventions, and finally, now that things are really like open back up, I'm really excited to like get to interact and be around. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well,
You come to a Florida convention, I'll definitely hit you up.
Keep your ears open.
Okay, I
Okay.
definitely will.
Great.
I don't
Great
know what
to
I'm
hear.
allowed to say or not say yet, so I can't. But just keep your ears open.
Awesome. Hey, well, Jeff, we also wanted to give you a chance, like in case there's any projects, anything that you're passionate about that you wanted to tell fans about, just before we go ahead and close out as well.
I got to turn it back around for a second. Have you ever had anybody actually be able to talk about anything in this segment?
It's mostly
Like-
like we people talk about like charities or stuff that they're
Charities,
big on,
yeah.
and shit
I
like
didn't
that.
realize I didn't realize it was gonna be all noble. Fuck no, I don't.
But like, it's anything you've
Yeah,
done that like
well-
maybe you felt like didn't get the love that you wanted it to get, like
Yeah.
shout it out. Yeah,
no,
type of
no,
thing.
no, not at all. No, only to say thank you to you guys for having me on, for taking the time.
No, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I mean anything I'm working on now is NDA, but again, like if you're interested, I'm around. There'll be stuff.
Hell
Oh,
There
yeah.
you go.
Looking
Oh,
forward
yeah.
to that.
Cool. Well, I think that's a perfect way to go ahead and close it out here. We want to thank Jeff again, because this has been so fucking cool. And we cannot wait to see what you're working on next, man. It's going to be really exciting.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Have
We'll
a
catch
good one.
everybody next time.
Yep. Thank you.